So what is Power BI? What's the hype around it, and how do you actually get started? If you're new to the space and curious to learn more, then this video is definitely for you. Today we'll dive deep into what Power BI is, where it came from, and most importantly, how to get started. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. Okay, so before we get started, guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Ikena, and I'm a senior business intelligence consultant. My goal here on this channel is to help you and your team upgrade your data and finance skills. So what is Power BI and how do you actually use it? So first, a brief history lesson. Power BI actually has ties all the way back to 2010 when the Microsoft team released it underneath a project codenamed Crescent. And Crescent actually was a part of a broader SQL Server 2012 release at the time, with one of the main goals being simplifying data analysis access for individuals and business users not central to IT. Now, it used to be back in the day, if you wanted access to any of these fancy BI tools, you either had to have a fairly technical background or work directly in IT. So one of the main initiatives for Microsoft with developing the Power BI product was honestly to democratize access to data analysis tools across organizations in general. So in 2013, they started to integrate early versions of Power BI into the Office 365 suite. And then in 2015, they launched their first official version of Power BI, which was completely separate from Excel and the other Office 365 apps. From there, Power BI essentially became what we know it as today, a cloud-based business intelligence platform capable of serving both small organizations all the way up to large enterprises at scale. So overall, Power BI is a business analytics platform that allows you to connect to data and build visual reports and dashboards using drag and drop functionality. You can then take these reports and use them to drive strategic decision making inside your company. Now, in general, there are mainly three components of Power BI that you need to be familiar with. The first one being Power BI Desktop, which is used to author reports. The second being Power BI Service, which is used to collaborate and share with others after you have published a report to the cloud. And Power BI Mobile, which is used to interact with reports on your phone. Now for this video, we'll focus primarily on Power BI Desktop, since that's likely where most of you will be spending the majority of your time, and we'll just briefly touch on the others. So let's start with Power BI Desktop. It basically has three fundamental features that you want to be aware of when working across the data analytics process. So you have Power Query, which is used to extract, shape, and clean data from your source systems. You've got Data Model, which is used to define table relationships between different sources and actually build out the model for your report. And you have Data Analysis Expressions, or DAX, which is a specific language used to create KPI calculations in your report. Now, you may be wondering, what types of data sources can Power BI actually handle? You can use Power BI to connect to a wide range of data sources, from simple text and Excel files all the way up to large relational databases with millions of records. In fact, I'll go through how to connect to an Excel data source here in a quick second. But just know in general, you can connect to over 100 different data source options fairly easily simply by using native connectors. And that list is always growing. I believe at the time of recording this video, there are roughly 192 connection options. The inbuilt columnar compression and optimization handling techniques also make Power BI a great option for any size data that you have, and especially for larger data sets. Power BI also offers some industry-leading security certifications from various compliance organizations across the globe, so you can always rest assured that your information is going to have some level of protections while it's stored in the cloud. If you're curious to learn a little bit more, I'll link below to a Microsoft security white paper so you can read up a little bit more on the topic. So now let's talk user roles and what you can actually do in it. If you're using Power BI, you're typically coming at it from one of two main approaches. You're either option A, using it to create, author, and publish reporting content as a data analyst or as a developer, or option B, you're using the reporting content to make strategic decisions as a business leader. Let's talk through option A first. To get started creating reports, you'll first want to download Power BI Desktop from Microsoft's website, which is completely free. And you'll just want to choose the right option that corresponds with your device. So I'm on a 64-bit machine, so I'll choose that option. So once you land on the home screen, you'll be greeted with several options here in a very Excel-like experience where you can do different things like connect to different data sources, create query transformations, and even insert visuals into your report canvas. It's really easy to get started. What you want to do is you can click one of these options here below, or what I like to do is come up here to the top and hit this Get Data drop down, and we're going to click Excel Workbook. So for this, we'll be using a pretty simple Excel file. I'll link it below in the description as well. But it's just an AdventureWorks sales data set that has different sales orders for various customers and a secondary tab of dates representing a date for each sale. So I'll close this down and we'll go ahead and click on the sales data set to load it in. And once that finishes, you should see two options for each of those Excel tabs we just looked at. So you'll have one for sales and also one for dates. What you want to do is just check off both of those options and click the transform data option. Now that we've connected to the data set and got it loaded here in this view called Power Query, we can start to perform a number of operations to enrich the data before loading it back into the main model. I always recommend doing this as opposed to just loading the information straight into Power BI, just to make sure that there's nothing that needs to be cleaned up behind the scenes. So if you look over here on the left-hand side underneath the query section, you'll see both of the Excel tabs that we just discussed loaded in here. You'll also see in the top, again, this ribbon-like experience where you can do a number of different transformations. And across the transform tab, you'll see some additional options, as well as across the add column tab. And over here on the far right, you'll see a properties box for if you want to do things like renaming the data set, for example. And here underneath the applied steps, this is going to be a very important place to be familiar with, because you can see all of the transformations that you make and kind of navigate up the hierarchy to see the historical view of what you've done. So these transformations are basically preloaded when I connect to the data source. But if I wanted to get rid of one of these steps, for instance, the change type step here below, all I have to do is click this red X next to it, and you'll see the little icon in the top left of each of these columns change. And I can go through now and change these back by just clicking that icon here in the top left and choosing the type that I want. I can do the same thing for order date. Or what I could do is click one of these columns, Control A, and select Detect Data Type. And that's going to typically get the right data type for each of the column based on uniformity. Before loading this in, I want to make one small tweak though. I do want to change the unit price to be a fixed decimal, and I'm going to replace current. And I'm also going to do the same thing with tax amount. Now, one quick thing I want to do before loading this in is to create a dedicated column for revenue. So if we click quantity and control select unit price, you can come up here to add column and actually drop down underneath standard and select multiply. And what that'll do is give us a combined field multiplying both of those together. And I'll just double click the column header and rename this to revenue. And again, notice how as I apply each of these transformations, the steps just show up here in the bottom right. So this actually looks pretty good. Before loading this in though, I'll pop over to the dates table just to make sure there are no major changes that need to be made here. And it looks good as I glance through it, but there's one thing here in the month year column. I actually don't want this 2024 here attached to the end. I just want the first two numbers because this is going to be, for instance, July 2019. So what I want to do is actually come up here to the transform tab and use the extract feature. And in this case, we're going to do text before the delimiter. So in this case, the delimiter is going to be /, and we're going to start from the end of the input and hit OK. Now we've got just the month year like we wanted, and that's going to be formatted as text. So that all looks good. So we can go home now and just hit close and apply. Once you got everything loaded in, the first thing we want to do is click on the Data View tab just to make sure that all of our information was loaded in properly. Then after that, we want to pop over to the Model View, which you can use this tab to create different relationships between your tables. In our case, we just have the dates in the sales table, and we may want to analyze our sales by different factors in our dates table by things like year, quarter, month, etc. So what we'll do is just left click on this date field and drag it onto the order date. And that'll create what's called a one-to-many relationship, and we'll just click save. You can also do different things here like hiding fields in the report view that aren't necessary for the user. So if I wanted to hide this tax amount field, for instance, I could just click that and it would be hidden. Now we want to pop back over to the report view tab. And from here, we can really start to build whatever we want. So if you come up here to the top right, you'll see this data icon, which again just shows the data sets that we've loaded. If you drop down the chevron, it'll show you the columns contained within each of those tables. You can use the build feature right here to see all the different visualizations that Power BI has included natively. As you hover over them, it'll show you the names of them. You can also hit this ellipse down here to get more visuals from the marketplace should you need them. And also you have this format option, which you can use to format not only the page you see here on the view, but also any visuals that you drop into the canvas as well. So let's quickly run through how we can build a visual. If you come here to the top left and select the build icon and just hover over the line chart and click that, it'll immediately appear in your canvas and you can drag it, customize it, and resize it however you see fit. So once you get it to your liking, you can press this icon here in the top left to start adding data to your visual. And we'll use the month year field that we formatted earlier and also drop in the revenue field as well. And it's really that easy. Once you have this chart, you can, again, drag it around, customize it, and reshape it how you see fit. Or you can continue to use it, but just convert it to a different visual. So I can change this into a bar chart, area chart, or back to a line chart. And you can start using this chart, for example, to start spotlighting things like high and low performing sales months. Once you start to get comfortable in the tool, you can start to build out more layered reports like the one I have over here. It's actually a global executive sales summary. And we can explore later in terms of how you'd actually build something like this fully from scratch. But once you're done building your report, you'll want to save and publish it up to Power BI service so you can start to collaborate and share with other colleagues. So if you come up here to the top right, there's this publish icon. And if you haven't saved your report already, it'll prompt you to do so. So you'll just need to find a space on your hard drive, and I'll go to my downloads folder. Let's see. I'll give it a name, call it demo report. And then what you'll want to do is come up here to the top right and sign in underneath your organizational tenant. So now I'm just going to come up here again and press publish, and I'll be able to see all of my available workspaces. Now, a quick note, your My Workspace is going to be a private folder. You can think of it as a space where you publish up items that aren't necessarily going to be available for sharing and collaboration, but by default, all of your other workspaces are, and you create these in Power BI service. I'm just going to publish this up to my YouTube workspace and hit select, and we're just going to wait for it to publish. Now that it is finished, we can hop over to Power BI service. And now I'll just pop up my web browser and navigate to app.powerbi.com to view what we just published. And that'll land me at my home screen, and I'll navigate over here to workspaces and click on my YouTube workspace. And you'll see here I have both my demo report file and my underlying semantic model or data set from that same file as well. Now, once you're here in Power BI service, there are also a number of ways to start sharing reports with other individuals. So if you click on this report, we can go through a few of them here. So you'll see the main report here firstly, but then if you go underneath file, underneath embed, you can do things like embed this into a SharePoint site that your team might already have set up, right? You can put this into a website or a portal, and you can even make this publicly accessible to the web, and people that you give the link to could access it from anywhere. You also could come over here and hit this share icon, which would allow you to copy a link and share with different colleagues, or you could come back up here and you could email it, use Microsoft Teams or PowerPoint to share out your report as well. And all you have to do is type in the email address of the individual in your organization who you're trying to send it to and press send. These days, Power BI also integrates really well with Microsoft Teams. So if you wanted to add this report to something like a Teams channel, you could open up, for instance, Microsoft Teams and just navigate to any of your Teams channels and click this plus icon here in the top left to add a new tab, and you'll select Power BI. Then you can press save. And once you press save, it's going to allow you to choose which report based on your workspaces you want to display in the tab. So here I can click Browse Workspaces, and we'll just search for our YouTube workspace, drop it down, and there's the demo report right there. So once we hit add, it'll actually render this report inside of Microsoft Teams, which is pretty cool. And there it is. You can also manage the report access permissions by clicking this button here and viewing this list. But before you get started sharing your work with others, you'll want to have some conversation internally about what type of licensing your organization needs. On Microsoft's website, there are essentially 4 different options for licensing Power BI. The first one is Power BI Free, which is basically just test driving the tool and building things more in a private environment. You got Power BI Pro, which gives you access to those collaboration and sharing capabilities. You've also got Power BI Premium, which gives you access to more advanced features like data flows and enterprise level capabilities as well. And then you've got Power BI Embedded, which is more so for custom implementations. Based on the size and complexity of your organization, you'll just want to sit down and determine what licensing option works best for you. Let's say, for instance, you have a team of 50 and they all want access to Power BI in some capacity, but they don't necessarily need any of the advanced AI or any enterprise level features. Then you could just license those users out at $10 a month and you'd be done. A quick note to throw in is also that if you have the E5 subscription of Microsoft 365, then Power BI Pro is also included at no additional charge. Now that we've actually got some content published up to Power BI service, there's one last concept that you'll want to be familiar with, and that's the distinction between workspaces and apps. So you can think of workspaces as basically just containers that really hold the building blocks for your analytics content, and that's going to be primarily in the form of semantic models and reports. But you can also use workspaces to store things like Excel workbooks and also dashboards, which can be created as live tiles from your existing reporting content. And then you have apps. And so apps are basically prepackaged workspace content that you're going to select to serve up to your users across the organization for more immediate collaboration and sharing. So things are already more so ready to go. Once you're inside your workspace or your app, you can start to do a number of things like personalizing specific visuals, adding bookmark filters in your report, and just doing really any other type of customization that you see fit. And it really gives it that unique feel on a user by user basis. Lastly, you can also view reporting content on your mobile device as well. If you just go to the iOS or Android store and download the Power BI app, once you sign in using your company credentials, you'll have access to all of the same reporting content across your apps and workspaces. And you may have noticed that in Power BI Desktop, there is an authoring view to design more mobile-friendly reports that we can definitely dig into in a later date. But that's essentially it. Really, that's everything you need to know to get up and running with Power BI. Just one final note, Power BI is always receiving updates. So Power BI Desktop is typically updated on a monthly basis, and then Power BI Service on a weekly cadence. I normally check out the Power BI blog, which I'll link below in the video description as well, just to stay up to date on all the latest product feature summaries and release notes. So it's definitely a good resource to check out. If you're interested in learning more just to get familiar with the basics, I do recommend checking out the Getting Started with Power BI Learning Path on Microsoft's website as well. And if you're interested in learning how to build the report that we viewed earlier, step by step from scratch, then just click the video link above and I'll see you there. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest content. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay safe.